Confide your worries to dear Mallory.
Ooh.
Next time on Family Ties. Thursday at 6 on Channel 5. Channel 5's Pam Dale, keeping you in touch.
It's been called the most dangerous spot in the world. A civil war that has killed or wounded 20,000 people. Widespread starvation. Even the UN has pulled its relief workers, deeming it too dangerous for them to stay there. Tonight, we'll take you to Somalia.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
It's what used to be referred to until not so very long ago as a strategically important region. There it is on the map, the Horn of Africa, fronting on the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. We and the Soviets used to compete frantically over two of the countries in the Horn, Somalia and Ethiopia. When the United States backed Ethiopia during the 70s, the Soviets supported Somalia. Then, in the 80s, we switched. And these days, no one in Washington or Moscow seems to care very much what happens in either country. Things are so bad in the Somali capital of Mogadishu that all the foreign diplomats pulled out months ago. The Red Cross, according to the British newspaper, The Independent, has done something it's never done before. It's hired armed guards to protect its staff and property. The Red Cross flag offers no protection. Even the experts on Somalia have a difficult time defining who these days is fighting for what or why. But during the last 3 months alone, 20,000 people have been killed or wounded. What you are about to see was shot by a British freelance cameraman, Carlos Mavrolia, who also narrates his own material. You should watch this. We all have a moral obligation to at least know what is happening in Somalia. But in fairness, I must tell you, it is a very disturbing piece of video.
The war is totally indiscriminate. It consists of firing heavy caliber weapons more or less in the direction of the enemy. There's no strategy behind it. There's no purpose behind it. It is a war of attrition. You've seen the pictures of soldiers lurking in buildings, of vehicles driving backwards and forwards along side streets, blasting ammunition. This is the sum total of Somali tactics in the capital. You see scenes of such total and extraordinary madness. Bodies lying in the street, some of them from 2 months ago, some of them from 2 days ago, unburied, rotting in the sun. The Somalis call it Somali music, and it's the continual ebb and flow of background gunfire. The fighting continues in one section or another of the town, every day, every night, all day and all night. When shelling stops in one area, the looters move in. And you can see them with wheelbarrows coming down the streets piled with furniture. Anything that is portable is lootable. Any kid with a cannon, any teenager with a Kalashnikov is recruitable for one or other of the factions. If you've got a Kalashnikov, you've got a job. The fighters seem to treat this as a combination of the only job in town, because as a fighter you'll get a stomach full of rice at lunchtime, and as a sort of game in which you parade down deserted and looted streets in gunship and these modified land cruisers with heavy machine guns bolted and welded to the back. It's a combination of a game and a job. I've got a sense of total surrealism. Downtown Mogadishu looks like the Hiroshima of the Horn of Africa. You see people being wheeled into the hospitals in wooden carts, in wheelbarrows, on the backs of donkeys. This is how a civilian will get to hospital, in addition to which the civilian cannot even begin his journey to the hospital until the shelling has stopped. Operations are being performed without anesthetic on tabletops. There's a severe shortage of anesthetics, there's a severe shortage of surgical instruments, and there's a severe shortage of trained doctors. In the city as a whole, there is one organization that operates on both sides, and that's the International Committee of the Red Cross. There is an American non-governmental organization called IMC, the International Medical Corps. French Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, are there. The British Save the Children Fund are there. And there is also a missionary organization called SOS. United Nations has fled. We're talking 5 organizations with, say, half a dozen expatriate workers, a dozen local staff, and 24 bodyguards each, who are attempting to continue to bring in medical supplies into the town. They are not bringing in food because of the danger of the distribution. The Red Cross worker who was killed there last month was killed in an argument over a bag of rice. The food shortage is potentially catastrophic. The population of the city is 1 to 1.5 million. Large numbers of displaced people have fled to beyond the suburbs of the city and are unreachable by any aid organization. They fled to the bush. Unfortunately, once they get out into the bush, they have no water, no food, no medicine. And yet that's preferable, I'm afraid, to being shelled 24 hours a day.
We need an international peacekeeping force. This doesn't mean we're not able to handle this situation by ourselves, but we need the help for the safety of the people and the stability of Somalia itself.
The interim president of the Somali Republic, Ali Mahdi Mohammed, is fighting his former general and chief of staff, Mohammed Farrah Aideed.
I think that it's not necessary to call for international intervention. We believe this will complicate the situation in Somalia.
Both sides describe themselves in exactly the same terms. They're both fighting for democracy. Of course, this is not very good news for the people who are lying with democracy's holes in them. Both sides insist they're fighting for justice, freedom, democracy, liberty, equality. It sounds wonderful, but the results are catastrophic.
When we come back, we'll be joined by the United Nations official who is in charge of political and humanitarian issues in Africa, by the head of a human rights organization who thinks the UN's efforts in Somalia have been a complete failure, and by an official from Save the Children, United Kingdom, who just returned from Somalia on Sunday.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer.
Ford Taurus, the pattern other car companies have drawn on for inspiration. Well, this year, we've given them even more inspiration. With a more aerodynamic design, a more intelligent interior, and dual airbags, an exclusive Ford Motor Company offer in this class. Once again, we've sent the competition back to the drawing board. Have you noticed a pattern developing here? Have you driven a Ford lately?
Did you know the cost of 2 business calls from the East San Diego pet stores to Dallas may surprise you?
Of course they're easy to beat.
With AT&T Long Distance, your small business can get the quality you trust at extremely competitive prices.
They really do make perfect pets.
Even though the other company would like you to believe, they always save you lots of money.
That's my big savings? That's it. Not exactly the catch of the day.
Competitive price, another AT&T advantage.
Hold the end of your string up, Joey. Joey. We're never going to get this done if you keep on eating the Kix.
Kix is a cereal that's low in sugar with a corn crunch that kids like. Kix also makes a great decoration.
So, how's it look? Delicious.
Kix, kid-tested, mother-approved.
Some say she should be the candidate. In the center of the Clinton controversy stands the other woman, his wife, Hillary Clinton with Sam Donaldson. Primetime, Thursday.
Joining us now live from our New York studios are James Jonah, a United Nations Undersecretary General for Political and Humanitarian Issues in Africa, and Rakiya Omaar, Executive Director of the human rights organization Africa Watch. And from our Washington studio, Andrew Timpson, the Africa Program Officer for Save the Children, United Kingdom. Mr. Timpson, I believe you're the most recent returnee from Somalia. Base it against what we just showed our audience. How close to an accurate portrayal do you think that is of the situation in Mogadishu these days?
I think it's a very accurate portrayal of a very dismal tragedy. I saw many child casualties in the hospitals when I was there. My greatest concern now actually is not just the casualties caused by the war, but the real risk of an open famine where we will see tens of thousands of children starving to death.
Is there any kind of a political solution that can even be considered, or does some outside force quite literally have to come in there and create peace so that other things can be done?
Well, I saw General Aideed on Sunday morning, and they were talking about an 8th ceasefire. It has been quiet over the last 2 days, and I think actually the Somalis have probably got to sort of broker this peace agreement between themselves.
Tell me a little bit about who is in there right now, because in a moment I want to turn to Mr. Jonah and find out why the UN is not.
You have really a very small group of private agencies along with the International Red Cross, the International Medical Corps, Save the Children Fund, Médecins Sans Frontières, and an Italian organisation called CISP. They are providing basic medical care, and I mean, we, for instance, are feeding about 5,000 children at the moment. I think all the agencies are looking for a bigger diplomatic and political presence, and only the UN can provide that. Without that, I think we will see an unfolding tragedy involving huge numbers of children dying of starvation.
Mr. Jonah, why has the United Nations been so helpless to date?
Well, I think that we must understand, first of all, that we have been involved in the humanitarian aspect of the problem, not so much in Mogadishu, but in the north of Somalia. The practice of the UN is to look towards the regional organizations, like the OAU, or, for example, the League of Arab States. They have not been successful, so the Security Council last week, for the first time, is attempting to assist the people of Somalia.
Well, can I interrupt there and disagree? I think the record of the United Nations in Somalia, both in the north and the south, is one of dismal failure. I think the United Nations has squarely turned its back on the people of Somalia. Part of the reason why the United Nations is having a hard time brokering peace now that it has been shamed into action by intense and unprecedented public criticism from principally the International Committee of the Red Cross, but also by certain sections of the State Department. The reason for its difficulties is that it lost credibility in Somalia by being the first to flee the country as soon as the former dictator was out. Within days of his leaving, the United Nations evacuated its personnel. The killings had already started, and civilians needed the international attention then, and the United Nations were the first to leave.
Can I come in there, please? I think this is a rather irresponsible comment. Our staff in Mogadishu were traumatized. Their premises were ravaged by the thugs in Somalia, and for us to be told at this stage that we fled, I think is highly irresponsible.
Well, may I just interrupt both of you for a moment to ask you then, Mr. Jonah, I mean, presumably the United Nations, which after all was the umbrella under which all the forces went into Kuwait, can, when it chooses to, mount the necessary protection and force for itself, that it ought to be capable of dealing with the people that you yourself referred to as a bunch of thugs.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think that's true that with the end of the Cold War, that the attention of the world was diverted from Africa. This is not just in Somalia or the Horn, all over Africa. But I think we must bear in mind that we have regional organizations in Africa, the OAU. You cannot blame the UN without first asking, what has the OAU done? What has the Arab League done? These are valid organizations, and we don't jump in before they have tried their efforts.
I'm sorry, but I'll tell you what, Ms. Omaar, we'll give you an opportunity to respond to that in just a moment. We have to take a quick break. We'll continue our discussion when we come back.
Volkswagen announces relief from the recession. Payment Protection Plus is here. Buy or lease a new Volkswagen now, and if you incur a layoff during the first 3 years of your finance contract, we'll cover your car payments. Plus, we'll cover your car insurance payments. And the best part, you never have to pay us back. Up to $500 a month for up to a full year. Payment Protection Plus. Call now. It's revolutionary, and it's only from Volkswagen.
Changing. Today's pork, 31% less fat. Or the other white meat.
A cold starts small, but before you know it, your cold is full grown. Maximum strength Dimetap relieves sneezing and congestion. 12-hour Dimetap Extend tabs, relief for the full-grown cold.
In the past, this car has been praised for holding its value. This one for outperforming the stock market. Over the past year, however, no other luxury car in its class has retained more of its value than the Lexus LS400. Maybe this is what they mean by a new world order. Visit Bet's Lexus Des Moines and see how smart owning an LS400 can be.
Fertility doctor for childless couples, but sometimes the sperm was his. Was the doctor making his own babies? An investigation, primetime Thursday.
Are the Biosphereans guilty of scientific fraud? Tomorrow, hear their response. Then why are more women carrying guns? Plus Michael Douglas on Good Morning America tomorrow.
Ms. Omaar, what's happening in Somalia right now is clearly by any definition a catastrophe, but why not take Mr. Jonah at his word when he says that the appropriate organization to turn to first is a regional one like the Organization of African Unity?
Because the Organization of African Unity has a history of inactivity, and the United Nations knows that very well. It should be the first organization to respond to conflict in Africa, but it has never taken the stand, and therefore to expect the OAU to take the initiative when the situation is so desperate is merely an evasion of responsibility, and the United Nations knows that very well.
How long is it?
Can I give a news to our friend? When I went into Mogadishu, the OAU queried why I went there without them. So you could even see at this very late date, we were being challenged for taking some initiative in Mogadishu.
With all due respect, Mr. Jonah, all of that does sound a little bit like bureaucratic buck passing at a time when people are clearly dying by the statistic that I mentioned at the very beginning of this broadcast. Since November of last year, 20,000 people are estimated to have died or been wounded. People are coming close to starvation. It surely does not seem time for the finesse of deciding, you know, after you, Alphonse, after you, Gaston, the OAU should go first, or the UN should get first. Someone should clearly get in there and help those people straighten things out. Don't you agree?
Well, that's why the Secretary General decided that we should be involved. And, you know, the Security Council, for the first time, has adopted a very comprehensive resolution calling for a ceasefire, asking for increased assistance to the people of Somalia, and at the present time we are now engaged in a very serious effort to help the Somalis to solve the problem and also to launch a major humanitarian program in Somalia.
Mr. Timpson, I realize this isn't really your expertise, but again, you are one of the very few people who's had the courage to go in there, spend some time in there, and therefore can report on what the circumstances on the ground are. Can this be resolved diplomatically at the moment, do you think?
I think we've got to try and to resolve it diplomatically, but I think Mr. Jonah is concentrating too much on political initiatives here. What the Somalis want is a humanitarian initiative, and so do the agencies on the ground. We're on the brink of mass starvation here. We're looking for some moral authority, and the UN can provide that if they take the courage, the institutional courage, to take some radical steps. And so far, they have not done that.
But I must...
Can I also
I think
interrupt
we have
there?
it. I think we have a plan. I think let us be very... We had in Mogadishu 8,000 tons of food, which was looted 2 days ago, as you know. And we are now also planning to go into Mogadishu with a 90-day program which will provide food and medical equipment to the tune of about $25 million if we can have a ceasefire.
What about, Mr. Jonah, if I could just ask this question, who's going to provide the security, assuming there is no ceasefire, who's going to provide the security for the people who are going to go in and distribute this food?
Well, this can be done only by the Security Council. Let me say that this was discussed informally in the Security Council. What they said was, go in now, try to get the ceasefire. If you don't get the ceasefire, come back to us and let us know. And we are now at the process of getting the parties' acquiescence. And if we do fail, I can assure you that the Secretary General will go back to the Security Council.
Ms. Omaar, I'm sorry I interrupted you when you were trying to break in before.
No, the point I wanted to make is that many of the initiatives that the UN is talking about are at some level theoretical. They say that they are imposing an arms embargo. Well, that's ludicrous in a situation where there are so many destructive armaments available that you don't need to import one more rifle to finish off everybody in Mogadishu.
You should just point out very quickly why that is.
Well, that is because a lot of armaments were available in Somalia thanks to the delivery of armaments both by the United States and earlier on by the Soviet Union. And there was also Addis Ababa in Ethiopia became a huge arms market after the fall of Mengistu, and a lot of armaments were bought there. And so there is no need to impose an arms embargo. The UN Security Council also talks about delivery of humanitarian assistance if there is a ceasefire, when the fighting stops. But they are not taking the initiative, the leadership that is required to bring such a ceasefire about. We are talking about, as Mr. Timpson said, literally tens of thousands of people facing starvation. This need not have happened if the United Nations and international pressure had been sustained since the fighting began in November. The UN went in 6 weeks too late, and even then it was a quick visit, an effort that was not well thought out, that has not been followed through, and it is time for the United Nations to take its leadership and its responsibility to the Somali people seriously.
Now, Mr. Jonah, yes, please, go ahead.
Can I just say that I don't quarrel with those who say perhaps we were very late in going in there, but I think they should appreciate that we have staff who have lost their lives. I happen to be the one who had to take the body of a doctor who was serving the people of Somalia in Bososa. And I think if the friends of that doctor and the relatives hear that the UN has been wasting its time, I think it would be a tragic news for them.
I don't think anyone is saying they're wasting their time, but that happened a few days after 5 observers were shot in Yugoslavia. Nobody made the connection between the United Nations' desire to maintain the peace initiative in Yugoslavia with that unfortunate shooting.
No, but
the
please,
people of Somalia should not be made to suffer for the fact that some murderous thugs in Bosaso in the north had irresponsibly murdered an official of the UN. That should be condemned and the assassin should be found. But that should not in any way affect the determination of the United Nations to find a resolution in Somalia. There is no connection between the two.
Well, I think, Ted, this is a point which is made by so many people. In Yugoslavia, the EC took the initiative and they tried to solve the problem. Then they came to the United Nations. You don't have the same comparable situation in Africa, both by the OAU or the Arab League.
Well, let me just very quickly go to Mr. Timpson. We only have about 30 or 40 seconds left, Mr. Timpson, and the question I have to you is, how much time is there before the food situation becomes so grave in Somalia that we're likely to confront mass starvation?
Well, there is no food aid in the port now. That has gone, as Mr. Jonah has said. I think we're talking about 2 or 3 weeks before we see an awful tragedy. My great concern is that the UN are talking about conditions. They want a ceasefire before they start their operation. I think that's a rather naive condition. We may not see a ceasefire. We've got to keep putting that humanitarian assistance in.
All right.
No, we have a plan.
Forgive me, Mr. Jonah, but I'm afraid on that note we have to thank each of you for joining us. Mr. Jonah, Mr. Timpson, Ms. Omaar, good of you to be with us. I'll be back in a moment with a program note.
A mistake was made. Okay, we forgot. We overlooked it.
Say you need something sent overnight. There are a few companies you can call, but say you need it Saturday morning, guaranteed. There are 2, but only one is so efficient.
Bobby, just give me a couple of minutes.
They get it there on time for far less, which is why to some, there is only one, UPS.
2 minutes, Gary. Yeah, all right. Let's go.
This one.
Let's go get them on.
Look at these red marks. These old glasses do nothing but pinch. They're a pain.
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore.
Now Lens Crafters brings you better fit for greater comfort. Lens Crafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new self-adjusting snug fit pads that flex to gently and securely hug your nose.
No more pinching. I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
Lens Crafters, better fit for greater comfort. In about an hour.
3 years ago, we set out to create a sports sedan. But first and foremost, we set out to create a Lexus. Introducing the new Lexus ES 300 Sports Sedan.
Morning the crime happened, he said he was there. But a different man was arrested and convicted and stands to spend the rest of his days in jail. Now, following a year-long Channel 5 News investigation, you'll finally hear his side of the story.
This is an American hero.
Me? No. I'm a teacher.
To the kids they reach, teachers are heroes. Call 1-800-45-TEACH. Be a hero.
Tomorrow on Primetime Live, Sam Donaldson interviews Hillary Clinton about the allegations of sexual misconduct that threaten the presidential hopes of her husband, Bill. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a videocassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
The person you love is dead.
Dear God, what did I do?
Everyone knows why,
Daddy, are you all right?
except you.
This is too weird for you.
You're gonna tell me, Dixon. You're gonna tell me now.
Well, you go to hell. It's no longer his neck, it's yours.
You sanctimonious! Start to Rose, The Burden of Proof, February 9th.
Dense fog early, otherwise partly cloudy with a low near 30.